Welcome back all again. Sorry for that discontinuation. I went ahead during the off time. I went ahead and lit up the place just a little bit so we can kind of see what we're doing without disrupting the other players in the server with the day-night cycle change. Okay. So, like I was saying about overhangs in the last video, we can start planning out where we want things to hang off the edges a bit, and it doesn't always have to be perfect. Like you don't have to have an overhang coming off directly from another beam like this, you know, and putting a wall here just to kind of give it extra space, extra block space. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be asymmetrical like this. It could overhang, maybe not this far, but just, you know, so you have visualization of this. It could kind of hang off just a little bit, not all the way flat at the edge, but also not dead center if you don't want it to be. For the sake of argument though, we'll just do this one dead center. So it'll be basically lining up with these two poles here. So just like we did with these sticky outy bits here, we'll add these. I would like for this build to have at least one block hanging off, which, I mean, this is perfect here. So basically we're just going to do this. Call that it. Call that quits. You can remove these on the inside. It will make a difference because you're eventually going to fill this up with the wall. So this is going to trail back to the reason why I said, you know, spruce wood, at least for this build. It can vary between your style and your theme, what you're trying to accomplish here. Let me get some torches out. But there's a reason why I had spruce for my style. I prefer spruce because I use spruce for a lot of the filling on my rooftops, so as well as floors to keep the theme. The reason I do that is because I put spruce wood trimmings along the roof, the angles of the roof at the very edges, and when you're trying to show more roofs and overhangs off the sides of the house randomly, you'll want it to match the spruce, the same wood type on the wood above. Like, I have to show you so you can understand that a bit. So here we see an example of spruce wood being used. This trimming, as it's called, the trim would also be made out of spruce that, you know, frames the rooftops. If this looked any different at the bottom, it might make the building clash against itself. So if we use birch, I mean, it could work. You could be different in that way, and if you can pull it off, bravo. But I play it safe a lot, so I try to keep the trimmings around the entire build consistent, just so it looks like it fits a certain theme or category. So we're gonna do the same here. We can keep that log. It won't be bothering us very much. Now we need to decide where the roof is going to go, how to shape the roof, how are you going to angle the roof and get that just right. So the basic idea, the way to do roofs, you'll want to find the dominant side, or in another phrase, I guess, you'll want to find the longest side of the roof and slant against it. So we're basically going to slant against it this way. Since this is the longest, the roof is going to go in a staircase shape, basically this way, and it'll meet dead center where these corners meet, this side and that side. So another thing to note about my style is I use a lot of 2-block high rooftops so that they angle a little more sharply towards the top. So to do that, I start with 1 in the corner, up 2, over 1, up 2, over 1, up 2, knock that out, over 1, and up 2. This should be dead center here. You'll repeat the same process on the other side. 2, over 1, up 2, done. We'll follow up this side. Up 2, 1, up 2. You get the point. Two. Okay. Now that you got your, this is the most of your basic framework so far. Nothing added, nothing really done. It's still flat, very much flat on all sides, and this is something we're going to want to change as we adapt and add on to the build, just like we did with this overhang. So we built this kind of early so I can show you what it does against the primary roof, the dominant roof. So when you have, say, an overhang like this, rarely do you ever want the overhang roof to match the dominant one. In other words, you don't want it to be this high or this wide. It would just look weird. So for this one, we're going to go ahead and start creating this roof here like this as an overhang. We'll leave it by itself just like that. And as you can see, it doesn't interfere with the height. It doesn't impose that height there. And it kind of stays as its own little thing, its own little overhang. Now, you can change this up a bit. This support beam would pretty much be kind of pointless here. So we can get rid of that and close that gap. So when we start adding wall, you now have a slight extra space. It might be slight, yes, but there's a lot you can do. If you keep adding on to the house and keep on with overhangs, eventually all those little nooks and crannies you start adding on the sides will start making the floor space overall greater. And it'll just look nicer from the outside. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and add another overhang randomly. No rhyme or reason whatsoever. We'll add one here. But this one, I kind of want it to be 2 blocks out. So we'll try to match it to the same height as the sideways log going across. Knock that one out. You'll see why we're doing that for the ones that come 2 blocks out versus 1 block out. You'll see it in a bit. And we'll do same pattern. Over 1, up 2. Over 1, up 2. So for these kind of overhangs that have a massive, or a more massive gap than the last, you have a full space to kind of walk through like that, compared to this one where it's right up against the frame, the body of the house. For these, I tend to put upside down stairs, invert them that way. Let's look for slabs. Oh, nope, I already got slabs. Put them in the center. That in the center. Now we're going to kind of cheat this a little bit. There was no beam here before, but we're going to go ahead and add one. Just so it looks like everything matches up, and just so it looks like that beam isn't just invisible, like, you know, coming out of nowhere. We're given this the illusion that there's a network of support beams that are kind of knotted together in that corner. Whereas this one just looks like it's bland here in the center. So we're going to go ahead and add that. Okay. So this is the next part of the build. You want to go from the ground up. We'll try to get this as quickly as possible before our time runs out. We'll move on to the next video if needed. Okay, so this is another important part of the style for Nordic and medieval styles. Elven you can probably do a bit different. Certain medieval, English medieval, you could do without these. Gosh, the word really escapes me, the term used. If it comes to me, I'll mention it later. But think of these as feet, the things that support the build. Normally you'd want to match whatever you laid as the base before. So I use stone brick here, so you know you're going to use stone brick out here as well. And you're going to go around and cover up all the support beams wherever they may meet the ground or the grass, whatever terrain you're building on. You're going to cover up that intersection so it's not as, well, plain Jane looking. That should be all of them. So for the next part, this is kind of where it'll depend on the builder themselves. You can keep two tradition here with the same wall, keep the look, and keep cobblestone with cobblestone. If you did wood here, then you do wood out here. You can do that, or oops, sorry about that staircase. Or you can fight against it and continue on with the foot that you put here. Continue with the same texture. That way it looks like the foot itself, the strut, is coming up into the wall. And it doesn't look blended. I prefer this a little more. It just depends on my mood and what I feel the building should have. You'll be able to judge that for yourself as you start building on your own. Next, we'll start adding the support to each of these logs. You don't have to do them all. Certain builds call for it though, especially Nordic or Dwarven Orc looking builds. They're more stone oriented than wood. They have a mix of wood, but you want to show that the bottoms are strong and sturdy. And what better way to do it than to show it has a stone bottom half on the structure. Do that for all edges here. Right here, you can kind of leave it empty, or you could fill it in if you really want to. I normally just kind of omit it at times. I'll leave as is. Also, for these, this is another important part to the build. You'll want to replace these. If the overhang comes out 2 blocks, you'll definitely want to replace that wood with this overhang, the spruce overhang, and then cover up the sides of the log like this. That way the logs don't look like they're coming out at a weird angle, and it looks a little more blended, and it looks like this can be a little more believable and, you know, fall a little more securely into that. Alright, that's all the time for this video. We'll continue on in the next. We'll just keep breaking it up into segments so nothing gets cut out or misinterpreted.